Tonight on The Download, we're discussing the pending legal cases for President-elect Donald Trump. Despite being reelected to the White House, he still faces several legal battles. Tonight, I talk with Professor Deborah Ahrens from Seattle University School of Law about what happens to the cases now that Trump is headed back to the White House. Well, Deborah, thanks so much for being with us here on ARC Seattle tonight. So we're talking about President-elect Donald Trump's legal cases that are still in front of him, ahead of him, as he gets ready to take the White House. What is this looking like right now, and what exactly is it that he's facing right now?
Right. So former president, President-elect Trump has four different legal cases or bundles of legal cases that he is still facing charges with respect to. Two of those are state cases, one of which is a New York case in which he's already actually been convicted of 34 charges and is awaiting sentencing. One of which is a Georgia state case in which he has not yet been convicted, but charges are pending. And then there are two separate federal cases, one of which has to do with election interference and one of which has to do with mishandling classified documents, both of which he still has pending cases with respect to.
Where do you see this going? I know the Supreme Court ruled on immunity, and then some of those cases that applies to, one of the cases it doesn't apply to. How do you see all of this going down? Because so many people are talking about what could happen, what might not happen. There is so much out there. Clearly, people voted. They voted President Trump to be the next president. These cases had been aired out on television, news, online for months and months and months. And the people did end up choosing President Trump. But where do these cases go from here? And what do you think might happen here?
Well, and that's a great question. And for better or for worse, I don't have a solid answer for you because to some extent, the question of what happens now that there's been an election is not a question we've ever really had to ask before, right? We have these four different criminal cases and the ability of the prosecutors to proceed in at least some of these cases turns on presidential immunity questions, which to some extent have been resolved. If there are issues that relate to things that the president has done in his official capacity, those are actions for which the Supreme Court has said he cannot be held criminally liable. But there are a lot of other things that he is accused of having done, which would not be things he would have necessarily done in his official capacity, which nevertheless, there's been some suggestion of, but no legal resolution around the question of whether or not you're simply immune from prosecution for criminal acts that you may have committed while you are president. And then separately, we have the whole other issue of him having state charges that are proceeding, at least at this point, which are not being pursued by federal prosecutors. I mean, honestly, part of the answer to your question is we don't know because we really are in unprecedented times. It's just unclear what happens with various felony charges when those felony charges are being pursued against somebody who's a president-elect.
A lot of eyes are on New York right now. Obviously, the other cases as well, and Jack Smith's case, and what could happen with that. But with Juan Merchan kind of moving that ruling into November, and both sides, working together to do that, everybody's thinking, well, could he potentially put him in jail, and could he be taking the oath of office in a jail cell? And, you read what people are saying online about this. You read both sides of the argument, and it's something clearly we've never seen before. But it's just interesting to see all of this coming down. I think if you look at one side, people didn't expect President Trump to be elected to a second term. You look at the other side, people weren't shocked by the results. But then you see all of this kind of coming to a head here with all of these cases. And then you still have both sides, one side saying, oh, he should be in jail. The other side, no, he shouldn't. These are political cases. And what do you say to all that?
Well, and part of what I say is that you have four different cases that are proceeding in four different courts along four different theories. And so they really are in different places. And so you have the New York case where you already have convictions. You have 34 convictions where President-elect Trump has been convicted of various charges that relate to actions that he participated in before the 2016 election. And so that's a case that's in one particular posture, which is he's already been convicted. And I was actually asked to comment on his scheduled July sentencing, which obviously didn't happen. It's now been rescheduled for at the very earliest, maybe later this month. And who knows if that would even happen. But that's a case that he's already been prosecuted for, he's already been convicted. It's just kind of a question at this point of what happens with sentencing. The Georgia prosecution, in contrast, is one where there hasn't been a trial. The trial judge was actually asked to dismiss the charges on the basis that you had a prosecutor who had an improper relationship with another prosecutor, and the trial judge declined to do so, but that case is on appeal. So that's a case that's very much in kind of its natal form. It hasn't gotten very far through the process. And then you have two federal cases, one of which in Florida related to the mishandling of classified documents has been dismissed entirely, and the dismissal has been appealed to the 11th Circuit. I'm not particularly optimistic that that's a case where the 11th Circuit will overturn the dismissal of the charges. And then you have a fourth election charges case that is being prosecuted by Jack Smith, who's already said he will resign. And if he didn't say he would resign, President-elect Trump has already said he would dismiss him or fire him. So that's probably a case that isn't going anywhere either. So really you have a couple of state cases where either there are convictions or there's some uncertainty as to how they will proceed. And it's really anyone's guess at this point what's going to happen between now and the time that Donald Trump takes office.
Are there any of the cases that we're talking about here that you feel potentially have a better chance than others standing up or continuing forward?
I think that if you already have criminal convictions, as you do in the New York cases, courts are really very respectful of jury verdicts. There are a lot of both rules of evidence as well as, in general, legal principles that counsel in favor of being respectful to jury verdicts. That if you have a group of people who have been assembled from the community and they've reached a conclusion beyond a reasonable doubt about somebody's status with respect to legal charges, that's something generally we're fairly respectful towards. And so if President-elect Trump were to face legal consequences for any of these four cases that I've suggested, I would think that it would be with respect to the case where he's already been criminally convicted. Because as I said, in general, we're pretty respectful to criminal convictions. That said, I don't know that a judge would be willing to entertain a sentence at this point. It's possible that a trial judge would say, I'm going to go ahead and kind of put sentencing on pause for the next
Mhm,
4 years, and we'll revisit this at the end of those 4 years. But I do think that that's the set of charges, given that it led to a conviction, that he's most likely to face repercussions for.
Gotcha. Well, Deborah, thanks so much for the information and the discussion, the conversation with me tonight about this. And we'll see what happens. I'm sure we'll find out in due time here, probably fairly shortly. But thanks so much for being with us here at ARC Seattle tonight. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
And we're going to take a short break. ARC Seattle at 10 is back after this.